Hello, it's Dawn Michelle and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about the decks that I worked with all throughout the month of November. I have quite the list this time. I have a lot of decks that I worked with and a lot of decks that I want to share. I don't really have much in the way of other things to talk about or share with you. I'm just kind of moving along with things, trying to get stuff wrapped up for the end of the year, trying to look at what I'm going to be creating on my channel and in my membership specifically for next year. I definitely know we're going to be doing the guided tarot practice again, so if that's something that you are interested in, you can still feel free to jump in on that because we're going to be starting fresh again in January with all new prompts, all new themes, and we're just going to be kind of continuing on what we're doing and adding a few new practices here and there along the way. The only other fun thing that I have to mention from November is I did actually kind of restart my journaling channel. I can't remember if I did that in October or November because the months are just kind of blurring together now. But I did restart it. I renamed it. It's just Dawn Michelle Journals now. I should probably have called it Dawn Michelle Plans because that's the majority of what's on there. But coming into 2023, I definitely want to talk about more journaling stuff on that channel as well. So if that's an aspect of my practice that you've been interested in, I'm definitely back over there doing some stuff, not as often as I do here because that's just kind of a for fun whenever I have something to share channel. But I did just want to note that I am making content there again here and there. So if you're interested in checking out my planner, what I'm doing for my planner system for 2023, journaling stuff, all that good stuff, outside of tarot, although I do occasionally talk about tarot related journaling on that channel. Definitely check it out. I'll leave a link for you in the description box. Okay, so enough of all that. Let's jump into the decks because I know that's why you're really here, right? So we're going to start with my monthly medicine decks, and these are the decks that I used for our guided tarot practice that I do with my members every month. Our theme for November was sitting with spirit, so we sat with the spirit of time, the spirit of ancestor, the spirit of place, the spirit of story, and the spirit of gathering. Those were our focuses throughout the weeks of November, and I did end up switching up my decks and using different decks for different focuses, which is always fun and helps me not only keep my tarot practice fresh, but also allows me to work with a variety of decks. Now, for my November monthly medicine, I focused on my vintage style decks for the most part. That was really what I wanted my focus to be. I had several new decks, new vintage style decks in my collection that I wanted the opportunity to work with. And so I let that be the focus, and that was the guidelines for which I chose my decks. Now, within that guideline of my vintage decks, then I went and looked at decks that felt like they tied into the weekly themes that we were working with. Now you'll see when we get into the other decks that I worked with this month, the vintage theme really only stuck to my monthly medicine. The rest of the month I worked with a hodgepodge of variety of decks, and we'll take a look at all of those as well. So the first two decks that we're going to look at are the two decks that I used during the first and last weeks actually of the November monthly medicine. The first week was sitting with the spirit of time, and the last week was sitting with the spirit of gathering. So I started the month with it and I ended the month with it, which was a really wonderful practice, and I had lots of other decks that I use in between. So the Grand Frau Duchess deck, or the Grand Duchess, Grand Frau something or other, I can never remember the name of this deck. This is a fairly new deck in my collection. As you can see, it is a vintage collage style deck. I really like the collage work that's been done in this deck. I think it's quite smart. It's also fairly cheeky, and it has a really great energy to it. I feel like this actually kind of exists more in the sort of old style TV shows from that time, where we see these slices of life, kind of has that everything's okay on the surface, that may be happily ever after on the surface, but when you start getting into the details of these cards, you can see that everything isn't always okay, right? There's stuff going on here. There's depth beneath the surface level imagery that we see. And I think that's really, really cool. It has a lot more to say than I was really going to give it credit for. When I first got it, I was like, oh, it'll just be a fun, kind of cheeky, fun little collage deck with this super great vintage style, right? And it does have that energy as well, right? I feel like it's also kind of a bit of a good mood deck. But if you really look and really dive into what's going on in all these images, you'll see places here where it feels like there's more going on beneath the surface than what we really can see. And so it reminds me of TV shows at that time, where it was like, you know, we were only seeing the one very curated slice of life idea of what life was like. And like, I'm thinking about like shows from the 50s, right? And it's kind of a fun hodgepodge of things too. Like, it doesn't always seem to exist in the same sort of time period, even though it is, you know, kind of that vintage, maybe 50s style kind of imagery. It does feel like it kind of crosses time periods a little bit. And so that is one of the reasons why I chose it for the deck for Spirit of Time, because I don't feel like it sits totally in that 50s energy, right? I feel like it's 50s up until like maybe the 70s, maybe very, very early 80s. There's occasional hints of that in here. I wouldn't say it's like my favorite vintage collage deck, but I did really enjoy my time with it. I enjoyed the energy of working with it. And I do have to say, like, this is a really, really affordable tarot deck. I've heard people say like the cardstock's not great because it is like really thin and flimsy, but like it shuffles beautifully. So like, I got no complaints there. Give me a thin, flexible deck that I can do that with any day over like cardboardy, cardstock kind of deck things, right? So the deck that I paired it with is the Botanical Inspirations, which I really don't probably need to go into any great detail about because I've done lots of videos showing this deck. I think I even did a deck featuring this video because it is one of my most sort of versatile decks in terms of what I can pair it with. And it's got great keywords. It's got really wonderful messages. The little inspirational messages in the guidebook are really a huge part of my connection to this deck. So if you have it or if you're thinking of getting it, like, definitely check those out because I think that's really what it's about there. These two decks together, though, I think work really well. The Botanical Inspirations does a really good job of giving a keyword, like a key phrase, anonymity and harmony, and then we've got the Nine of Swords and the Empress. And I like that it has that kind of, for that focal point, it creates a great start to the reading. And then what I do is get into the guidebook for the Botanical Inspirations and I read the inspirational message, and that kind of ends up being my takeaway. So this deck actually works kind of twofold, right? It provides the focus point at the start of my reading, and it also provides the wrap-up message at the end of the reading. I think paired with this tarot deck, it works really well. It's got, you know, the similar kind of vintage aesthetic, vintage energy. So here we have youthful love with the Seven of Cups and the Seven of Wands. That's interesting. I did really enjoy the pairings with these two decks together. I think the Botanical Inspirations really does a great job of kind of looking at what are we focusing on in the tarot cards. So we have strength of character and moral integrity. Like, I've talked about this in other videos, you know, sometimes when there's multiple keywords, and I did a whole video on this, is, you know, sometimes I will relate certain keywords to certain tarot cards. And I think that's a really cool thing to do. And you can do that quite a bit with this deck because there's often, you know, multiple words or multiple phrases on the cards. We have sweet thoughts with the Knight of Swords and the Queen of Swords. That's interesting. We'll do one more. Elegance and patience. So again, that's that two keyword thing. So I might relate elegance to the Five of Coins and patience to the King of Coins. That would make for an interesting reading. So the next week in the monthly medicine was the Spirit of Ancestors. So I ended up using the Antiquarian Tarot, which is new to me and I just picked up at the Northwest Tarot Symposium last month, and the Divine Muse Oracle. These are both by the same creators, and I don't do that very often in my pairings, but it really worked quite well. So the Antiquarian is, again, another vintage collage style deck. It doesn't have quite as much of the chaos, I think, that the Grand Fraude, the Duchess deck does. It has a little bit more, minimalist collage, if that's really a thing. In that way, it kind of reminds me of more of a vintage like Spolia tarot, where it's not overrun with imagery. I actually kind of prefer this art style when it comes to collage. It's a little less chaotic. I find this to be a little bit easier to read with, although there's definitely something to be said for a deck that has a lot going on in the imagery, because there's a lot of things that you can pick up on. So the deck that I paired it with is the Divine Muses. Now, I used this as my focal point for our reading for that week. I did also pull in the Botanical Inspirations with this pairing as well, but we've already taken a look at that. So it was really just a one card to wrap up the message. This is really cool. I love this deck. The guidebook is phenomenal. I did read the guidebook that goes along with the Antiquarian as well. But what I really love about the Divine Muses is that we have these kind of ancestral muse energies that kind of give us an energy, a person, or an entity, let's say, or an energy that we can work with. And that does actually work really well for me for creating a focal point for a reading. So like if we have the Muse of Music, then I would get into the guidebook and I would take a look at what those, what the creator had to say in there. Let me just go ahead and show you real quick each of these guidebooks. So this is the Divine Muses Oracle. And for each one, we have the title, we have keywords, we have the essence, and then she talks about the card itself. We have the card in shadow, and then it talks about what's going on in the card. And she does a really similar setup with the Antiquarian guidebook as well. They're both beautifully written guidebooks. I definitely got into the Divine Muse guidebook more because I don't necessarily need the guidebook with the Antiquarian, but it was fun to see like who's in the images and what's going on there. So here we have the Muse of Music between our King of Pentacles and the Page of Swords. The Solar Feminine with the Eight of Cups and the Page of Cups. That's interesting. I really enjoy working with these two decks together. It was a lot of fun to have that kind of central focus in the aspect of the muse coming through. It did work really well for Ancestor because, you know, Ancestor, Muse, kind of that idea of connecting to something other than self. And so you can use that in that sense. Like if Ancestor work isn't necessarily a thing that you do in your own practice, you can also think of that as kind of just connecting to an energy beyond yourself that you can pull in, that you can borrow from, that you can gain guidance from. And I think it works really well in that way. These two decks are really cool together because even though they are by the same artist, and even though they're both kind of vintage style, they do feel a little bit separate from each other because of the setup on the tarot. Like we have almost like these photographs that are like sitting in an album with a title underneath, which I think is really cool. I like that idea. It makes me feel like I'm flipping through an old photo album when I work with this deck. But then we have the Divine Muses that has this beautiful borderless imagery, which helps it kind of connect, I think, to the two tarot cards. And I really like the setup on that. I do like when my tarot and oracle do feel like they kind of go together, but they stay unique and in their own energy, right? They don't mush together, just bleed all into each other in a sense. They stand their ground. They work together, but they maintain their individuality. I really like that idea when I'm looking at pairing my tarot and oracle decks. So this was a really, really fun one. I really love the Divine Muses. I've used it a lot. My love for that deck is why I went ahead and picked up the Antiquarian. I purchased it at the Northwest Tarot Symposium from the creator, which was really wonderful. I have already ordered her new oracle deck, which is the Magical Child Oracle, I do believe is the name of it. I've already pre-ordered that, so I'm real excited for it to get here. But I love the muses in the Divine Muses. And the Antiquarian Tarot is very readable for me. I had a really, really wonderful, very succinct readings with it. I think this might be sort of the inspiration for the Magical Child Oracle. It looks really similar, although I feel like it pulls in fairy tales into that oracle deck, but don't quote me on that because I haven't seen it or read anything about it since October. So the next week in our monthly medicine was the Spirit of Place. And for that, I chose the Rosebud Tarot and the Hedgewitch Botanical. Now again, the Rosebud Tarot is another fairly new deck in my collection. I think maybe I've had it a few months, but this is the first month that I've ever worked with it. I was kind of holding it off for November so that I could work with it during this kind of sitting in spirit month. Again, we have another vintage collage deck. Clearly, I have like a theme going on this month. I really, really like this one. I like this one better than the Duchess Tarot. I'll just be perfectly honest. I think this one is so beautiful. Again, it's not as chaotic, and that's what it is. I think that's the thing that kind of gets me with the Duchess one. It's a bit chaotic for me. I like the coloration in this one better. I like the more simple images. It reads really well. I really enjoyed working with it. It's definitely one that I pulled throughout the week as well that I was working with it. I didn't just use it for my monthly medicine readings. I also used it for other readings throughout the week, and then I think once or twice throughout the month as well. This is one that I will definitely be returning to again. It's got like a great energy to it. It's a really fantastic size as well. Like it's a little bit smaller than a traditional tarot. It is on beautiful linen cardstock. It's a little slippy, but it's gorgeous. I really enjoyed tactilely working with this deck as well. I do believe this deck is coming out mass market. I do not know anything about like what kind of cardstock it's going to be on or anything. I debated waiting and then decided to go ahead and get this one because I knew it was on this beautiful linen, and because I don't know what the mass market's going to be, like I didn't want to chance it. So the deck that I paired it with is my Hedge Witch Botanical. Again, this is another deck that you've probably seen multiple times on my channel because it's kind of a favorite. It's kind of a solid oracle that I just tend to pull into a lot of different readings and workings. And again, I like having pairing my newer decks with kind of tried and true oracles as well, because that helps me to focus more on getting to know the new tarot rather than getting, distracted by the oracle deck as well. Although I did have a couple of new oracle decks that I worked with this month as well. I really like the white space that the Hedge Witch Botanical created with this particular reading. All of the courts have been renamed. It took me a hot minute to figure out what was what, but once you kind of get the idea of it, it is still kind of a hierarchy, which is quite interesting. Once I kind of got the idea of that, it worked really well for me. Again, I like the white space that is in the Hedge Witch Botanical. It creates a lot of breathing room around the Rosebud Tarot and really allowed those messages to shine, where the Hedge Witch Botanical was providing that anchor, and that was great, but it really allowed the Rosebud Tarot to be really expressive and to really dive into a really beautiful expanded message. And of course, depending on how many cards I had on the table, depended on how expressive and how large that message really got. Again, they don't necessarily have the same art styles, right? Because this is a hand-drawn deck, and then we have the Rosebud, which I believe is just, I believe it's digital collage, but I could be wrong. Done digitally, collage done digitally. So it's different art styles, but I think they really work together because the Hedge Witch Botanical kind of has a little bit of a modern yet vintage feel for me. I think it's because it feels very modern because it's very minimalistic and there's a lot of white space, but because it's drawn, I feel like it's something that I would see in like an illustration I would see in somebody's old grimoire, which is really cool. I really like that about it. But yeah, we had some really cool readings together. So here we have Attract with the 9 of Water and the 4 of Fire. This is the type of collage deck that is kind of more in my wheelhouse. It's more of along the lines of what I like. And it's definitely one that I will be working with again. There's just something about the colors. There's a lot of roses. There's a lot of pinks and reds and black and white, which I really like. I love this Death card. This 4 of Water is really awesome too, but this Death card is just fantastic. Adventure with Death and the 4 of Water. I'll just do one more. We've got Patience with the 7 of Earth and the Life Giver. I love this card as well. It's just beautiful. So the next week in the monthly medicine was sitting with the Spirit of Story, and for that I chose the Guided Hand Tarot and the Earth Alchemy Oracle. Look at the backs together. Now, when I originally set out to choose my decks for the month, I did a video with my members and I went through my decks and talked about which ones I was going to use, looked at some different options and decided on this one, the Guided Hand, for the Spirit of Story because it was about speaking to your personal story. And I didn't know what oracle deck to pair with, so I just grabbed the Urban Oracle because that's what I had on hand. And I was like, oh, that'll work all right. And then I remembered that I had this Earth Alchemy Oracle when the week came, and I pulled that out, and it was so much better. It was such a great pairing. I really love the Guided Hand Tarot. Again, this is another collage tarot deck that feels like right up my alley. This one might actually be like kind of, what do they call that? Retro collage? Analog collage? I think that's what they call it. Analog collage. I think it might have been done by hand. I do not know for sure, so don't quote me on that, but it kind of feels it has a little bit more of that handmade collage vibe, whereas like the Rosebud it feels a little bit more precise. So it feels like it was probably done on computer, where this, and I could be wrong, but this feels a little bit more in that handmade realm. I used it, I think, in September as well, but because it's like this kind of mishmash of artistic styles, it's kind of like mixed media. There's photos, there's like texture, there's paper, there's, I don't even know, ink, magazines, like a variety of different types of mediums I feel like were used in the creation of this deck. And that just so speaks to me on my own artistic level. And I feel like this deck kind of represents that. So the Oracle deck that I ended up pairing with is the Earth Alchemy Oracle, which ended up working out so much better than I think the Urban Crow would. I just grabbed the Urban Crow because like I just didn't know. I didn't know what to pair it with. But this, I feel like the energy goes so much better with this deck. I really do like the all the writing on the deck. I like that it's got a title, it's got kind of a keyword, or maybe a weighty keyword, and then we've got some additional keywords on the bottom. I could have totally used this deck on my keyword spread video, but like we'd already kind of covered that concept of using multiple keywords on an oracle deck. But the energy of these two decks is really, really compatible. I feel like this is a pair that's really quite succinct. So here we have Pixie Helpers and Green Adventure Train. So we see what's on the card kind of in the title. Then we have sort of a key phrase or keyword there. Not all wanderers are lost. Between the Queen of Cups and the Knight of Wands, we have clearing the way, luck, and opportunity. And I think that works beautifully with the Guided Hand Tarot. The colors actually too are just super cohesive. This is such a fun pairing. I had so much fun working with it. This is another one that I used this deck through that whole week, not just for my monthly medicine, but also for lots of other readings and things that I did throughout that week as well. And it just worked beautifully. We have the Crystal Grid with Focus, Create with Intent, 10 of Coins, and 9 of Wands. Beautiful. Yeah. This is kind of a magical little pairing. I think it works really well. Again, we have totally different art styles, but I feel like that kind of hand-drawn sort of energy is also threaded throughout the guided hand, so I feel like it does actually work quite well. Just a beautiful pairing. I got some really beautiful messages. I do feel like these two decks are both kind of in that, I don't want to say hug deck space because the guided hand is not a hug deck, but it does have a softness to it where I feel like it's delivering the messages that I need, but it's doing so in a really gentle, loving, and supportive way. Like it totally could have and could become that caregiver role in my tarot village, right? Let's just talk about all the different videos that I made this month. But I feel like it definitely could end up occupying that space in my collection, because it reads really beautifully for me, has a really wonderful supportive energy, but it doesn't shy away from the things I need to know. And I think that's really important. I don't have a ton of decks that I feel like just sugarcoat things all the time for me. That's not really helpful in my practice most of the time, because I feel like my life is not sugar-coated, right? And I don't necessarily want somebody to just pat me on the back and tell me everything's gonna be okay. Like I wanna know, how do I make it okay? Not to say that I don't have hug decks. I do, but I don't have a ton of them. And I feel like this is a deck that could that could occupy that space really well of telling me what I need to hear and just delivering it in a way that isn't upsetting or isn't jarring. It's giving me what I need, but it's doing so in a nice way. And I think that's really cool. So moving on to some of the other decks that I used for various things throughout the month, we have the deck that I used for my simple Sunday spreads. As I've mentioned multiple times, those are just free little 3-card spreads that I offer every Sunday on my public Facebook group. And for that, I use the Tree Spirit Tarot. Now, this is, again, a very new deck to my collection, and I wanted the opportunity to use it and to work with it, and specifically to dive into the guidebook because I did purchase the guidebook off of Amazon. It's quite an investment to get them both together, but I think it's really worth it. It's a beautiful, beautiful deck. I'm not always a fan of like just like a single photo on a card. I like photo collage, but I don't have many decks that are just like a single photograph. But it actually works really well in this deck. I like that we have the suits being renamed to work with the energy of the trees. We have the name of the tree and a keyword. And that's been really helpful for me to have that keyword on there to help tie that back into the Tarot Association, as well as, the tree or the nut or whatever it is that we're looking at, the fruit. It's all related to the trees and what the trees produce, which I think is really wonderful. I really like, from what I've read in the guidebook, because I don't know a ton about trees, but I really love working with tree energy. I think the correlations that the creator has made are really spot on. And I think this guidebook is kind of like key to working with this deck for me, because there's so much great information in here. We have information about the tree, about the symbolism that we see. We have a message and we have a challenge for that card. And I think that all of that information is really what has helped me to make a connection to this deck. And we have it for all of the cards, not just the majors, but we also have it all through the minor arcana as well. So I think like it was an investment, because I feel like the deck and the book are both around $40. The deck is through one of those print-on-demand card places, and the book I got on Amazon, but I really, really felt like it was worth it. I got a lot out of my simple Sunday readings. They are kind of designed to be quick and easy and simple, but as I kind of proved to myself throughout the month of November, you can really dive quite deeply into them, and I did, using the guidebook and really diving into what each card meant. I read the whole entry. I thought about it. I did some journaling on it. I kept the cards, a picture of the cards on my phone, and referenced it throughout the day. It was a really wonderful experience, and I'm definitely going to be continuing my work getting to know the tree spirits. So the deck that I used quite a bit in my spiritual practice this month was the Kali Oracle, and this was a beautiful gift sent to me by Queen Osset. Now, I do have the smaller pocket-size edition of this deck, and I have used it quite a bit, but I found that there was something much more profound and moving using the big deck, not just because I had the full guidebook to really get into, which was quite lovely. I really enjoyed reading the entries in that, but there is just something so powerful about this deck at its larger size. It was a beautiful practice working with it. I pulled a card every couple of days after I got it, and just sat with the message. I read the entry in the guidebook. I did a little bit of journaling here and there, and it was just a really beautiful experience. But I did find that the images, I think because they're just so much bigger, they feel so much more powerful in this larger size. It's almost like you can't shrink that Kali energy down so small. And now that I have this size, I don't know, to be perfectly honest, if I will end up using the pocket one very much, because this one just felt like it held the energy of Kali so much better. It held space for it so much better. It reflected it. It amplified it. It was just a really beautiful experience. So I definitely want to thank Queen Osset for sending me this. I probably wouldn't have gotten around to getting it, for quite some time, because I was like, oh, I have the pocket. It's fine. I don't need the big one. But it's a totally different experience working with this one than it is the smaller size one. So I guess this here is a case for, you know, cards being larger size. This is one of my absolute favorite cards in the deck. So we will end on that. But that was a really beautiful experience to work with the Kali Oracle and to use it with the at the larger size and to get into the guidebook, because I definitely read the guidebook every time I pulled a card with this deck, and that was really beautiful. So also in my spiritual practice throughout the month of November, I worked with the Pythonic Tarot and the Earth, Moon, and Shadow Oracle. Now the Pythonic Tarot I've actually been showing quite a bit lately because, to be perfectly honest, it hasn't left my table in like 2 months. It hasn't left my table since it got here. I absolutely love this deck. It so embodies my own spiritual practice, my own spiritual journey in such a beautiful and very, very personal way. And I've been finding lots of different places that I can work with this deck in my practice beyond just my spiritual readings. However, that's definitely been kind of the key focus with this deck is kind of that spiritual connecting to the Dark Mother energy, which is another video that I did last month. But I also talked about this deck when I showed the walkthrough of the Earth, Moon, and Shadow Oracle. Now this is a new Oracle deck in my collection, and I've really been having a wonderful time getting to know it this month. I have been using it in readings. I've been using it with readings with the Pythonic quite a bit, and those have kind of been the two that I've really sort of married together. I won't go into too much detail with it here because, again, I do have a full video showcasing this deck, and then I do talk quite a bit about working with it with the Pythonic in that, which is where that inspiration came from when I got this deck and did the walkthrough. The first deck that popped to mind was that Pythonic, and I've been working with them together ever since. Again, I do have a full video on the Earth, Moon, and Shadow Oracle, and I did some work with it with the Pythonic, so I'll definitely link that below for you. So 2 other decks that I've been playing with throughout this month will be no surprise if you saw my playing with pairs video, because that inspired this whole pairing of these 2 decks, and that is the Villains Tarot, the Disney Villains Tarot, and the Blessed Bee Oracle. I'm gonna be honest, the Villains Tarot is probably my favorite deck this month. It has not left my table. I have done readings with it almost every single day. I adore this deck. It is like climbing up there to be one of my top decks, which is just kind of funny. I just have to say, this deck is such a good mood deck. Like, it makes me so happy whenever I pull this deck out. It makes me happy to work with it. I have been using it when I play Disney Dreamlight Valley. I have used it for readings on a pretty much daily basis. I even bought toys to go with it. So when I do my readings, I have my big beast. He comes and sits on my table with me. And I also have these little Disney, they're called Disney Doorables. I'll try to get them up here. So there's Maleficent and Cruella. These came in a whole villains pack. The Evil Queen and Ursula. I pulled out the ones that were my favorite, but they did come in quite a large pack of little Disney villains. They're teeny tiny, like an inch or so, and they're super cute. So I put Beast and these little characters out around when I do my readings with the Disney villains, because yeah, that's how I roll. So I've been pairing this with the Blessed Bee. Now you've already saw this pairing in the Playing with Pairs video if you watch that, but this deck has really surprised me how versatile it is. I really thought I was just going to use it for like the one thing, for like pulling blessings out for people, but I have ended up using it quite a bit. Like I'll do a quick flip, but you know, I did just do this in a video not too long ago. I really like the way these decks work together. And I do just have to say that, like, I mean, even when we have the same character, normally this would drive me crazy. I'd be like, pick a different villain. There's plenty of them. I do not freaking care with this deck. I love this deck. I don't even care that there's repeat cards in here. It's just the images and the readings and the illustrations, like, all goes together so well. I talked about it being like a blessing and a curse. That's how it works for me, and it's so beautiful. A blessing of the waters between the 5 of Cups and the 10 of Cups. I mean, how cool is that? These are just amazing. I love this pairing. This is my favorite for the month. This is my favorite deck right now. I'm definitely having a total love affair with it. It is not going anywhere. A blessing on a friendship with the Queen of Wands and the Five of Wands. And there's the Poison Apple. And like the little things like that, the little synchronicities with these two decks together are really, really cool. Like it works beautifully. I love it. I love it. Can you tell? I love it. So yeah, that's my Disney Villains Tarot that has been like my absolute favorite this month. Like it goes places with me. It doesn't even just stay on the table. Like I take it around and I take it places and I do things with it and I absolutely love it. And then I've been pairing it with the Blessed Bee, which has been a lot of fun too. But to be perfectly honest, like I do readings with this all the time just on its own as well. So the other decks that I have been absolutely loving playing with and getting to know in November is the Stranger Things Tarot with the Southern Botanical Oracle and the Southern Gothic. This little family here is just amazing. And I do have to say, just for my members, like I did figure out not to open the box the whole way. Like I was taking the whole tray out and it's like impossible to get back. Still not a super great setup. I'm probably still gonna make a bag, but like I did finally figure it out. So for these three decks together, oh my gosh, are so amazing. Okay, so first let's talk about the Stranger Things Tarot because like I did a whole video on this, right? I wasn't entirely sure that I was going to keep this deck long term because while I like the Stranger Things show, I'm not like a super fan. It's not like a fandom that I feel like something like Star Trek or Stargate where I'm like, I need everything from that, right? I need toys, or like the villains, right? I don't need the toys. I don't need all the other stuff. It's not something that I sort of collect or want to really immerse myself in on a regular basis. But again, I really like the show. And I do actually really, really like the tarot deck. And the more I use it, the more it's growing on me. But I wasn't entirely sure like I was going to keep it long term. And then these two decks came into my life. And this little deck family is amazing. This is the Southern Gothic Oracle. And again, I do have a video where I show this pairing and I do talk about these decks a little bit more, but I have so enjoyed working with this deck. I really love everything that's depicted in here. I love all the energy. There's nothing in this deck that I don't have some sort of a personal connection or feel resonant with in some way, shape, and form. Besides maybe the Bayou, that might be the only one that I'm like, struggle to make a little bit of a connection to, but like even that, like that kind of swampy energy I can kind of get behind because like I live in the Pacific Northwest and it's super wet here a lot of the time. It is not swamp wet. I understand that's totally different, but like just in being able to tie it into like my real life type of a thing, right? And then we have the Southern Botanical, which like it's a botanical deck and it's beautiful and I love the keywords and it's just like perfection. Like I'm not biased at all, but like it's totally one of my favorite oracle decks now. I really, really enjoy working with it. It reads so well for me and I so love the way that the cards are illustrated. This little deck family, I mean, I did a whole video showing like deck pairings and this was definitely in there. And that's where I kind of discovered incorporating the Southern Botanical as well. Cause I started working out with these two together, but then I did the three of them. And like, I just absolutely love it. Because of this Stranger Things Tarot is going nowhere in my collection because there's something so deeply personal and nostalgic about this pairing here, these decks, and it takes me to a certain place. It evokes a certain sort of energy and emotional state for me. And it's a very good one. So I really enjoy bringing this energy into my everyday life. It feels kind of like it takes me back to my roots in a way. It almost has this weird sort of ancestral feel, like more modern ancestral feel, I guess. Not primal ancestral, but I'm doing a terrible job explaining this, but it feels like there's wisdom coming through from just a few generations past. When I work with these decks together for whatever reason, like I feel like I can hear you know, the spirits of days gone by coming through this deck. And I really love working with it. It's been really fantastic for gaining some clarity around some things for me. And it's been a really, really solid pairing, solid reader. I really enjoy working with them all together. I do want to mention that I have been working with the Conjure cards. So I just got these in, I want to say about the middle of the month. So I haven't had a chance to do a ton of work with them, but I am working on developing a reading based on all of these. And I'm working on incorporating the Conjure cards in here. Now, playing card divination is not something that I'm super familiar with, so I do need to do a little bit of a work on that and you know, spend some time learning these cards a bit better. But like, it does bring a really different kind of energy. But like, just to pull the Conjure cards in alongside with these, I think is going to be really cool. And like I said, I'm working on developing a specific reading or specific spread for that. So we'll probably be seeing it coming soon as I continue to kind of work through what it is that I want to create with that. But I do think they are going to work really well together. This is probably not the configuration the spread will be in, but I just wanted to share with you a couple of them together so you can kind of see it. I think it makes for adding a really interesting layer to the readings. And so once I get that, you know, really fleshed out, then I'll be able to share that with you as well. So the last deck that I have to share with you today is the Gateway of Light Activation. And this is a fairly new deck in my collection. And I've already been exploring doing some portal readings with it, which I did with my members. I really have been enjoying this deck. This deck has surprised me. Let's just say that. In doing that particular reading or those readings that I did using it again with my members was really great. I paired this card with the Disney villains. I mean, I'm just saying that villains deck is super versatile. I really like the artwork in this deck. I think it's super cool. I will let the card dictate the tarot, the Oracle card dictate the tarot that I'm pulling with it. But I also really like the title and the 3 keywords that we have on the card. I think they work really well. I'm using these as like portals, access points into readings, and then pairing it with tarot to flesh out the reading to help me enter and exit the portals. It's been a really, really cool practice. I was playing with it with my members when I first got it, kind of just, you know, trying to figure out how I want to build this reading. Once I get it maybe 100% figured out, maybe I'll share it in my spread series. And yeah, it's been really cool. I've really enjoyed it. Like it kind of surprised me. And actually the guidebook is quite good. I feel like, and I mentioned this with my members, like I feel like I've had lots of Kyle Gray decks. I feel like I've rehomed lots of Kyle Gray decks, but I feel like this is the one that's probably gonna stay. It's probably gonna make the cut because it's a very versatile deck for me in that sense, and it does align with my own personal practice. So I really have been enjoying working with it. So that was all the decks. Let's talk about my tarot journal real quick. My tarot journaling the last few months has been really, really hit or miss. I started the month fairly strong. I decided to go back to this journal that I used in July. So I've bounced around a lot this year, and that's fine. That happens sometimes. So I had my July readings in here. I decided to use it just again for November. I started out fairly strong. I did get all my decks listed in here. I was just gonna do like my readings and just get the information in, no cards. Like I did not have time for all of that. I just needed to get my readings in here. I started out the month doing some stickers, and you'll see like real quick here, that went away. I skipped a page on accident. But then I did stickers the first time and that was it. I just used different colored markers and pens as well as my letter stamps because I love my letter stamps. But basically what's been happening is that like the busier I get, the less time I have to do this. And I did end up like making notes in my phone instead. And so here you can see, here's the last one that I did in here, which was the Spirit of Place week. And I think that was the second or third week. So I think I made it about halfway through the month in my tarot journal. I set up for my Simple Sunday. I did the reading. I have notes in my phone and pictures in my phone, but part of it, I think, is that I do not like this book. That's not true. I shouldn't say that. I do not like this book for tarot journaling. I think it's beautiful. I wish I would have saved it for Fae work. I might actually buy either another one or just maybe, because there's quite a bit left actually. I would like to do a sort of deck study with my Heart of Fairies Oracle. And so maybe I might use this if there's enough pages. I'll count them out. If there's not enough, then maybe I'll pick up another one to do with it. I just don't like tarot journaling in a book like this. It just does not work for me. If I'm going to use a book and write by hand, and I think I said this in July when I used this book too, that like I want my dot grid, and I keep trying to get away from that, and it just doesn't work for me. I kind of have another idea for something I want to try in 2023, but I'm going to have a dot grid journal for a backup. I also always have my digital journal for a backup. And so lately I've been kind of going back and forth between those things. Sometimes I journal in a paper book. Sometimes I journal digitally. Sometimes I just put notes in my phone. What I've been doing is if I do a spread and I do notes in my phone, then I just drop it into my Good Notes journal as well. It's nothing pretty. It's literally just the picture and my writing. And so like it's nothing pretty to share, but I keep trying to work in this, and it doesn't work as a tarot journal, and that makes me not want to tarot journal too. I've also noticed that like if I'm not happy working in the book that I've chosen to be my tarot journal, then I don't want to do it. Like I still do all my readings. I just end up putting them in a digital journal instead because that's just quicker and easier, because I don't want to fool with this. Because I just don't like working in it. Like it would be great for a journal or like a study journal. But for my tarot journal, it does not have the right feel for me. So that's where I'm at. So there you have it. That is the decks that I worked with all throughout the month of November. There were a lot. I had a lot of fun playing with tarot in November though. I really just allowed myself to kind of use whatever I wanted to use in the moment. But I also really stuck to my practice with the monthly medicine, because that gives me structure even when I either one, don't have time for anything else, or two, like then I can just go off and play, but I still feel like I'm getting all the benefit of keeping a consistent practice. So I've pulled these ones out here. We're gonna play favorites this month. I'm totally gonna do it. I don't normally do that because like I for the most part, like I love all my decks equally. That is so not true. I do not love all my decks equally. I would be lying if I said that. I do have to say that like these decks were standout decks for me throughout November. These ones for sure, poor little Rosebud, but these ones for sure are all decks that I plan to continue working with for at least the rest of this year. The Pythonic Tarot is like, I'm having a love affair with it. I'm having a love affair with my Disney villains. Like this deck for me is just like, it's super fun. Anytime, like it's a good mood deck, but it's also a really, really serious reader. And I love that it can do both. Like if I just want to have fun and play with my cards, I can pull out my villains. But if I really need a serious message in the moment, I can also pull out my villains, which is super cool. I think my favorite collage deck from the month was the Rosebud Tarot. I do really like a lot of the other ones that I have. Like I really like the Guided Hand as well. That is definitely a favorite, but I think because the Rosebud was new, like the Guided Hand is not super new. I did use it in September. So we're gonna say the Rosebud Tarot is my favorite for this month, but overall I probably prefer the Guided Hand. So rude to play favorites, right? Then these three. All of these three. I am in love with the Southern Oracles, as I call them, the Southern Gothic and the Southern Botanical. I am just in love with these decks, and I will get into playing with them in other ways. But for right now, I'm just really enjoying working with them with the Stranger Things Tarot. So yeah, totally playing favorites this month. I have had such a great time with my decks. Like I always enjoy using my tarot decks, but like this month I incorporated a lot of play with them as well. Like, I mean, I bought toys to go with my decks. Let's just put Beast right there. He's gonna hang out. And you know, I have like my little mini figures here for all my little villains, and I love them. And I like create this whole little setup when I work with my Disney villains. Like if I'm here at my table, I also totally have my villains with me when I'm playing Dreamlight Valley in the living room. So like I said, this deck travels around with me. I'm probably going to make a bag for it, even though I don't mind the box. I'm probably going to make a bag for it just so it's easier for me to carry around, because I do totally carry that deck around with me. And now I've got little toys that go along with it too, which I've never incorporated toys into my tarot reading before. If you've not done that, I highly recommend it. It was so much fun. So now they're mowing, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Say thank you very much for hanging out with me today. As always, you'll find links for everything I've talked about here in the description box below. I hope you all had a wonderful November, and I wish you many blessings moving into December.